There are certain women in Hollywood whose presence defies easy explanation. They do not shout for attention, yet they command it. They do not chase relevance, yet they remain relevant. Lisa Bonet has always been one of those women, but since her separation from Jason Momoa became public knowledge, something about her has shifted in a way that has left observers, insiders, and fans struggling to put into words exactly what they are witnessing. It is not a dramatic overhaul. It is not a reinvention campaign. It is something far more unsettling to those who have spent decades watching her. It looks like freedom. To understand what is happening now, you have to understand where Lisa Bonet came from, because her story is not a simple one. Born in San Francisco and raised in Los Angeles, she grew up between worlds, never fully belonging to any single one. Her parents divorced when she was young, and that early experience of being caught between identities, between cultures, between expectations, shaped a woman who would spend her entire adult life navigating spaces that try to define her against her will. When she landed the role of Denise Huxtable on The Cosby Show at just 16 years old, America instantly fell in love with an image of her. The trouble was, that image had very little to do with who Lisa Bonet actually was. The Cosby Show made her a household name. It also made her a symbol. And as anyone who has ever been reduced to a symbol can tell you, symbols are prisons with comfortable furniture. For years, she played the role the industry expected. She showed up, she performed, she smiled for the cameras. But even in those early years, people close to her could see that the public version of Lisa Bonet and the private version were two entirely different people. Producers reportedly sensed early on that she would never allow fame to fully swallow her sense of self. That instinct, which many mistook for arrogance or aloofness, was actually something rarer: self-preservation. Her decision to appear in Angel Heart in the late 1980s was the first time the world was forced to confront the gap between its expectations of her and her actual interior life. The film was dark, sexually charged, and psychologically complex. Everything that Denise Huxtable was not. The public reaction was fierce. Critics did not merely dislike the film. They felt personally betrayed, as though Lisa Bonet had broken some unspoken contract with American audiences. But Lisa herself never saw it as rebellion. In her own words during that period, she was simply an actor trying to grow, trying to be taken seriously, trying to exist beyond the confines of a character who was never meant to contain her whole self. That clarity of purpose, that refusal to apologize for her own evolution, became a defining thread running through every chapter of her life that followed. The fallout was real. Professional doors closed. Public perception shifted. She stepped away from the spin-off series she had helped build, at least in part because the show refused to allow her character to reflect the realities of her actual life, including her pregnancy. At barely 20 years old, Lisa Bonet found herself being judged not just for her creative choices, but for her body, her decisions about motherhood, and her refusal to bend herself into whatever shape the industry found most convenient. Hollywood filed her under difficult. She filed Hollywood under conditional, and once that mutual understanding was established, neither party ever fully recovered from it. Her marriage to Lenny Kravitz was another chapter that the public consumed with enormous appetite and very little accuracy. What looked from the outside like a glamorous union of two cool, beautiful, creative people was, on the inside, a relationship between two young people still figuring out who they were under enormous public pressure. When it ended, Lenny has spoken about the emotional weight of that period. Lisa said less, as she always has. She moved to Topanga Canyon with her daughter Zoe, deliberately placing geographic distance between herself and the machinery of Hollywood. She changed her name legally to Lila Coy Moon, an act that many in the press treated as eccentric, but that was, in reality, entirely consistent with everything she had ever done. She was simply refusing, again, to let an industry own her identity. Throughout the years that followed, Lisa worked when she wanted to and stopped when she didn't. She raised her daughter in an environment deliberately designed around nature, animals, and emotional honesty rather than visibility and performance. She practiced yoga. She studied movement. She cultivated an inner life that required no audience. When the public noticed her absence, it called it a disappearance. When those who knew her were asked about it, they used different language entirely. They talked about someone who had made a choice, clearly and deliberately, about what kind of life she wanted to live. Then came Jason Momoa. When they first encountered each other at a jazz club in Los Angeles, he was not yet the global star he would become. He was younger than her, relatively unknown, and by several accounts, genuinely nervous in her presence. What developed between them grew slowly, away from cameras, without the performative quality that so often defines celebrity relationships. Those who observed them together in those early years described something that felt genuinely private. Two people who had found something real and were intentionally protecting it. For Lisa, who had spent so much of her life guarding herself against the world's tendency to consume whatever she offered, finding that sense of safety with another person was significant. She spoke about it with unusual openness, describing a feeling of being supported in ways she had not previously experienced. They built a life together that many people pointed to as evidence that it was possible to create something genuine inside the relentless machinery of Hollywood fame. They co-parented well with Lenny Kravitz, who remained a consistent presence in Zoe's life. Their blended family, watched from a distance, seemed like a quiet miracle of emotional intelligence. And for a period, perhaps it was. But the person Jason Momoa was becoming, the global franchise star, the constant traveler, the man whose life increasingly required him to be everywhere and everything for enormous numbers of people, was not entirely compatible with the life Lisa Bonet had spent 3 decades carefully constructing. She had built stillness. His career demanded motion. For a while, those two things can coexist. Eventually, they cannot. The separation, when it became public, was handled with the same restraint that has always characterized Lisa Bonet's public life. There were no accusations traded in tabloids. There was no carefully managed statement designed to shape public sympathy. There was simply a quiet acknowledgement that the relationship had ended, delivered with mutual respect and without the kind of theatrical grief the media always hopes for. What many people did not know at the time was that the emotional reality of the separation had been lived through long before the announcement was made. The public moment was simply the formalization of something that had already been privately processed. That gap between private reality and public announcement is itself a statement about how Lisa Bonet moves through the world. She does not perform her life for external consumption. She lives it, and then, when necessary, she communicates the minimum that courtesy requires. Since the separation became known, what people found most disorienting about Lisa Bonet is not what she has done, but what she has refused to do. She has not launched a comeback narrative. She has not appeared on the covers of magazines talking about her healing journey. She has not posted carefully curated images on social media documenting her reinvention. She has remained, as she has always been, almost entirely private. And yet, on the rare occasions when she has been photographed, something about her is visibly different. Not in the way the industry typically means when it talks about transformation. Her face has not been surgically altered. She has not lost or gained weight in ways that suggest she is performing health for an audience. She simply looks like a woman who has removed something heavy from her life and is moving more easily without it. Her approach to her physical well-being has been consistent for years and reflects the same philosophy she applies to everything else. She has spoken in the past about natural skincare routines, about movement practices rooted in African dance and yoga, about treating the body as something to be cared for rather than corrected. She has explicitly rejected the language of anti-aging, which is itself a quietly radical act for a woman in Hollywood who is now in her late 50s. The industry profits from convincing women that age is an emergency requiring constant intervention. Lisa Bonet's visible contentment with her own face is, within that context, a form of dissent. What people find genuinely difficult to process is not her beauty or her stillness. It is her sufficiency. She does not appear to need anything from the world that the world is eager to offer her. She is not lobbying for a role. She is not managing her legacy. She is not performing recovery. She is simply living on terms she set for herself decades ago and has never meaningfully deviated from, regardless of professional or personal consequences. That kind of self-determination is rare enough to be remarkable. In a woman who has maintained it consistently through fame, backlash, marriage, motherhood, and loss, it becomes something closer to extraordinary. Her daughter Zoe Kravitz has spoken about her mother with a combination of admiration and clear-eyed understanding that suggests she was raised by someone who modeled something specific and intentional. The values Lisa instilled that the body is not a public project, that authenticity is more valuable than approval, that walking away from something that doesn't fit you is strength rather than failure, have visibly shaped the person Zoe has become. Legacy in the Bonet household apparently does not mean staying visible. It means staying true. What the ongoing conversation about Lisa Bonet's transformation reveals, more than anything, is how poorly equipped most people are to understand a woman who has genuinely opted out. We have cultural frameworks for the celebrity who falls apart after a high-profile breakup. We have frameworks for the one who bounces back with a new album or a magazine profile or a carefully timed public appearance. We do not have very good frameworks for the one who simply continues to exist quietly and deliberately in a life she has built entirely according to her own values, without apparent concern for whether anyone is watching or approving. The separation from Jason Momoa did not create Lisa Bonet's transformation. That transformation had been underway for decades, since the moment she first realized that the life Hollywood was offering her came with conditions she was unwilling to meet. What the separation did was remove one of the last remaining structures that required any degree of compromise with a pace and a world she had already largely left behind. She did not walk away from love. She moved toward a version of her life that no longer required her to negotiate the terms of her own existence with anyone else. In doing so, she had become something genuinely unusual in contemporary culture, a woman who is fully, unhurriedly, unapologetically herself, and that, for reasons worth examining carefully, is exactly what is causing a stir.